Welcome to Sensible Prepper Live. We're going to be talking today about how long you should prep for SHTF. What is the sweet spot? What should you do? The big problem and the question is when is enough enough? And we're going to try to kind of answer that, at least give you some direction. And we have Robbie Wheaton with us from Wheaton Arms. Also has the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel. And the link, it will be down below in the description. He's been a gunsmith for over 20 years. Has a company that makes Glock aftermarket parts, and their flat face trigger is phenomenal. And you guys just released your G43 barrels.
We did some 43X threaded barrels. Pretty excited about those, to have those out on the market. We got some stainless ones finished up now. We've got some at coating for some different colors and stuff that'll be available in a couple of weeks. So
yeah, and they're excellent barrels. About that. They're excellent barrels. And also he does all the dagger upgrades for Palmetto State Armor.
Yep.
So great guy, great to have him here with us today. And also Sarah Mack is over on the computer. She will be monitoring comments, and if you have questions, you can start asking questions at any time. She starts taking those down. We'll take a little break, and you can offer those questions. Also, we really want to thank Exotac. They are sponsoring today, and they give a 20% off using Sootch 20 with the link down below in the description. And we really appreciate Exotac, the best fire starters on the market. And typically I have some to they're shiny and they're real nice, but I didn't. Okay, guys. It is a big question, especially for preppers. How long? What am I doing? What are my goals? What am I putting together? And, some people are like, I don't want to be a doomsday prepper. Mm-hmm. I want to be a sensible prepper. And that's really what this channel is about.
Yep.
We try to be sensible, but there are certain things, that people just aren't prepared for. One of the things that astounds me, if I lived in Florida,
mm-hmm.
Why do I wait until they say, a hurricane's coming, to run down to Home Depot, buy all the wood, get my gas cans full, do all this stuff.
Buy a generator.
Yeah, buy a generator.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the extra water. You're fighting for products. It's like Black Friday, except it's even worse because people are panicked. And, they're just not prepping. And so if people won't prep for something they know is on the way, they know it's on the way. Of course, the weatherman says
it's no different than where we live here. In South Carolina, in the upstate, we get a little bit of snow most years. And when they predict that we're going to get a little bit of snow, there is a huge run on the grocery stores. Everybody has to get their milk sandwiches so they don't run out and starve, when the power's out for 6 hours, maybe. And, it's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, you need to stop by the store and pick up some eggs or something or whatever for a meal that you're planning on cooking for dinner, and there's nothing left. The shelves have been just decimated.
Right, they're just wiped out
for a half an inch of snow.
Yeah, exactly. And for you guys that live in real snow, you're more prepared. You're more prepared. And so one of the things about it is we don't, and a lot of people don't. Now, if you're watching this video, typically you're more minded to be prepared. You see some things that are going on, or, you don't even have to think zombie apocalypse, or there's certain levels that we're going to go down, and we're going to talk about them. First off is, most people don't even have a week's worth of food in their house. Yep. They just don't. And really FEMA recommends, and the government emergency system says that you should have at least 72 hours of supplies. Mm-hmm. Have some batteries, have a radio, have some things. I mean, first off, you got to start with the basics. And so have at least a 72-hour window, for people that are bugging out. That seems to be the magic number. 72-hour bug out bag.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and so I'm going out of the country next week to a third world country for a mission trip. And there's a lot of things that are on this list that are checklist items for me. That it's really placing yourself into a SHTF situation, and you have to go through, and there's a lot of things that I have to take with me for my personal health, my personal safety. So this has been a really great, kind of a quick lesson to put something together for a specific type of environment that, all the tools that I'm going to have for that.
Right. I mean, that's a good point, because you are emerging yourself into this third world type country, and you're helping these people.
That's right.
What happens when you don't have help? So 72 hours is pretty basic. And guys, first off, if you don't have 72 hours, you really need to get yourself in good shape. One thing about it is you need to have water put back. Water is a very important element in all of these scenarios. But water is 1 gallon per person per day minimum. That's minimum. That doesn't really include bathing. Should be a couple of gallons per day. So let's say we have a family of, 6. That means we need 6 gallons of water per day. For 72 hours, that's 18 gallons of water. Is that right? Yeah. No, that's 3 gallons per. It's 12. Mom, I didn't do well in math.
6 gallons.
6 gallons.
3 days. 18
3
gallons.
days. Right. 18 gallons.
Yep.
So you've got to have at least enough to survive, because the one thing about it is sometimes they'll have boil orders. Sometimes the water, we have a water main, shut down. You had that a while back.
We have.
Where they busted the water main. Now it was a limited time, but contamination in the water system, issues with water. I mean, there can be problems. There are some places in this country that definitely have rationing water, and they have to be very careful, especially on the West Coast.
Well, and even your commercial water still has a lot of things in it that you probably don't want to drink.
Right.
Depending on your area, where you live, where you're from, there can be heavy metals in your water. There can be lead in your water. There can be arsenic in your water. There's lots of different contaminants, BHPs, that can be in your water that can harm you long term. That you can have your water tested for it, see what your commercial water has, and then look at different filtration systems to be able to filter even your commercial water that comes into your home.
Yeah, they say that there's more chlorine in your tap water than there is in your pool.
That's right.
So, that's one thing to kind of think about. But one of the big things is you've got to start a plan. And so for me, and this is one of the things about 72 hours, that just gives you a base. Let's say you're new to prepping. You have nothing. Start out with thinking, okay, I need to get my 72-hour plan together. Put it together. Get you some medical supplies. That's a very important part. Make sure that you do have a well-stocked pantry. And that's pretty much what you need, is a well-stocked pantry. But also make sure that you can have foods that you can prepare, on ways that you can prepare them. So without power, how can you prepare food? Well, a grill is a great way to do it, but you've got to do it outside. And there are some inside options as well. But how can you get through a 72-hour period?
Well, in the big scheme of things, a grill is extremely wasteful with the amount of, if you've got a propane grill, it's extremely wasteful, the amount of propane that it uses to be able to cook.
Yeah.
Compared to like your little camp stoves and stuff, which are very efficient at producing heat and using a very minimal amount of propane.
Right. That's true.
So grills will get you by, but that half full 20-pound bottle that you've got on your grill, it may or may not last you 3 days cooking 3 meals a day on it.
That's a good point, because if you're really cooking a lot on it, you need to have some stocked up, and that is only 3 days. That's just your 72 hours. And so these kind of situations, or like a power outage, you have a storm come through, you have limbs, you have an ice storm, and again here, we could have a power outage for 6 hours, or 6 or 7 days with an ice storm. Well, here is the thing, guys, too, to consider. Right now for us, where we live in South Carolina, there are a bazillion people moving into the area, and they're building as fast as they can build. It's putting a major strain on our electrical grid. And so they've already announced, and I've talked about this earlier, but they've already announced brownouts and blackouts that are going to be scheduled for certain places. And supposedly they're going to let you know ahead of time, and then, you got to be prepared for it. These things are going to get more and more. And the more that we become less dependent on fossil fuels and more dependent on battery power and wind power and solar power, which really honestly are not ready to be able to handle the power needs that we have, we're going to be short. We're going to be short is what we're going to be. And so some of this stuff is just very applicable to right now, today. And so that's one thing about, this whole list. Now, it could be a small civil unrest situation, and we've had those before. It could be just some minor things, but that 72 hours, guys, you got to lock that down. Now move from there and go to 1 week. Again, 1 gallon per person per day.
Mm-hmm.
So right now at 1 week, you have to personally have 7 gallons of water put back.
Yeah. I mean, that's 42 gallons of drinking water for your household.
Right. So we've got to have that, and we've got to have a place to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that set up, and that's just for a week, guys. And there are some other options, and we'll get into that in a minute as far as how to, harvest your water. But the big thing is getting that water stored aside. 1 week. Now, what is a 1 week? Hurricanes, sometimes the power's out for an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Earthquakes, that's another one. Civil unrest can also cause some issues according to where you live, especially if you live in an urban environment. Very important to have those things set aside for those kind of situations. Okay, now we're going to go to...
Well, one of the big ones a lot of people don't think about are fires. Like forest fires and stuff.
That's true.
The power companies, in a lot of cases, if there's a big fire, the power companies will shut the power off.
They'll shut the gas off. They'll shut
right.
your propane. They'll shut all utilities down. That's
right.
True.
Yep.
That's true.
And that's something a lot of people don't consider is, I'm 30 miles away from this fire or this natural disaster. And then all of a sudden your power goes down. You don't have any gas. You don't have any water. Everything's turned off. All your utilities are turned off because of the grid where the natural disaster is. You fall within that grid area.
Right. One thing that happened here, and I've brought this up many times because this was one thing that came out of the blue, was we had a train derailment and it had chemicals. And they had to evacuate 1,500 people. And they had to come in. They knocked on the door. They said, you got to go. Yep. Now, one thing is, guys, is typically you'll have services that'll help with that.
Right.
And if you're looking at a 72-hour, 1 week, even a 1 month situation, you're going to have emergency services because typically it's a local problem.
Mm-hmm.
When we get into national problems, help is going to be a lot more scarce.
Right.
And so at this point right now, it's going to just get you to a point where you can get to evacuation centers or get to some kind of FEMA camp or something like that, if that's where you want to go. Now we're going to be going to some questions here in just a second. So I want to give Sarah Mack a heads up. But okay, so blizzards. We had a blizzard one time. We were living in the mountains of Western North Carolina and we were out of power for 10 days. Mm-hmm. And so, we had to, thank goodness we were able to function. We had a fireplace. We had we had propane and we had a propane tank. One thing about it, guys, if you have a Generac generator, one of the big home generators, typically they're run by natural gas or propane.
Right.
And so, again, if they shut down utilities, that's going to shut you down. Now, and if you have solar panels, you could probably get by a lot better unless you're in a blizzard area, which the solar panels will be covered. And so having contingency plans, are something that we want to consider as well, because sometimes, like old Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. And so 1 month, 30 gallons of water per person. And so you're really starting to get space problems.
That's right. I mean, you're 210 gallons for your family.
Yeah, 210 gallons.
Yep.
We have some of the 55-gallon drums, and we have them full. And so those can supply water for us. And that's probably one of the most space-efficient ways to do it.
Yep.
But if you live in an apartment, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, you're not putting back 4 or 5 55-gallon drums in that apartment.
Well, you're typically not having six people in that apartment. But let's say even if you have a couple, for 30 days, that's 60 gallons of water that you've got to put aside. 60 gallons. That's a lot of 1 gallon jugs. Yeah, milk jugs. Where are you going to put it?
Yep.
Apartments are already space, prohibitive already. And so, planning out what you're going to face as you plan for what you're looking to do. I'm not telling you that you need to supply, you need to have a year's worth of stuff. I'm saying for you, where you are, you need to decide. And then if you want to move to the next step. But the one problem is a lot of times is people look at the situation a year in advance, and then they concentrate all this energy on just certain segments and they have big holes. So make sure that you balance out food. What are you going to do about food? Are you going to be able to prepare that food? What about the food in your freezer if you have a power outage?
That's
where
right.
are you going to deal with that? So, making sure that you have 2,000 calories or so. You may have to eat a little bit lighter if you're in a long-term situation. But you've got to make sure that you have the calories, and not only calories, but a balanced diet that gives you nutrition. A month on beans and rice is going to be rough in more ways than one. It's going to be rough. And you got plenty of toilet paper and all the things that go on with you just living normal life. So that there's some things about that as well. But then we're just talking right now about 1 month. And so to me, anyone, whether you are prepper minded or not, should be definitely at least 1 month prepared for emergency situations, everyday, common, average situations.
That's right. Well, even like we were talking about water, a month of water is hard to be able to store for most people. But having the ability to be able to access water for a month, filter that water, purify that water, so you still have a drinking source,
right? And
knowing how you're going to filter it, how you're going to purify it, and how you're going to be able to transport that water for a month,
right?
Is even though you're not storing it, those are things that you have to plan on.
Well, and even if you have your water in a 55-gallon drum, how are you going to get it out?
Right.
Especially if it's one of the sealed drums. Now, I like the ones that have the clamps around it and you can open it up. Plus, you can clean it out.
Right.
We have rain catchment systems, which is a great thing to have. But the problem is there are certain areas, especially in the Southwest, where that can be illegal. So you have to measure out what are you going to do. For us, we also have a pool. And it is a potable water source. We're going to want to filter it out, obviously, but it does give us emergency water. And so having some different options, guys, you can live 3 days without water. So water is a big priority, but also is hygiene. Hygiene is really important as well. And so making sure you stay clean, you keep from getting sick. If you get injured, you may not be able to get medical attention. You need to be weighing that out. So as you build your list from 72 hours to 1 week to 1 month, make sure that you have those things taken care of. And listen, guys, a lot of times it's overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff to buy, a lot of things to put together. So do it as you can and make it as a goal. Don't strap yourself. Don't run your credit cards up. Just do it as you can. And, it's funny, because for us, we buy the supplies and then you look back and you go, wow, okay, we're doing good here. It just builds. But making sure that you're hitting the major points of water, food, medical, the different, some kind of fuel to be able to cook with, whether it's wood, whether it's propane. Propane is one of my favorites because it's very stable.
It is easy to store, doesn't take up a lot of space. I agree. Propane and natural gas are two of my favorites as well.
Yeah. I mean, gasoline is very volatile and it's difficult to store. Okay, let's go to some questions and then we're going to move on to more heavy duty, 3 months and above.
Dave asks, are blue barrels safe to store water?
Yes, most of them are, but you have to check to see. Sometimes when you buy used blue barrels, they can have chemicals that were in it before. We have a Tropicana plant that's close by, and I've bought barrels, the surplus barrels from them, and it smells like apple juice. Yeah. I mean, they smell really good. But now what I do is, well, in fact, there was a place here, Barrel Superstore, where we bought all of our rain catchment system barrels, and they went out of business. But there are sources where you can buy barrels and they will tell you, and there are certain designations on the barrel, on the bottom of the barrel, that you can look up to see if they're food safe or water safe. But you want to make sure that you have a way to pump it out.
Right.
Timothy Van de Beek asks, how much bleach would it require to purify the blue barrels mentioned?
So it's, 3 drops of chlorine per, or tablespoon of chlorine, I think, per gallon. And so, you would have enough in probably a full, Robbie's going to get the official reference, but, typically with unscented standard bleach, you should be able to, with one gallon of it, to be able to take care of it. And we're going to get
4.5 teaspoons for 55 gallons of water.
No, well, that's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Well, then you're doing good. You can get a gallon of bleach out of it, go for a while.
It goes a long way. Yep.
And two, it'll also, even water that you're just harvesting, if you're going into a creek or something, you want to boil the water and then you want to maybe treat it, filter it out. You go to a river, you can also do that, but you need to make sure that you boil that water. I don't care how clean and beautiful that creek is. You do not know what's going on upstream. And a buddy of mine was in one of the most beautiful streams in Western North Carolina. They were kayaking. The water was beautiful. It was cold, trout swimming in it. I mean, it was just gorgeous. It was a mountain stream. And they got upriver, and it was actually a river. It wasn't a stream, but they got upriver, and there was a dead cow in the middle of the lake. I mean, in the middle of the water. You don't know what's going on above it. So always take care and purify your water. Water purification tabs are great. The problem is it doesn't remove the odor typically, or the taste,
or sediment.
The sediment. So, the one thing about a filter system is it'll typically help you with that. And so we've been using the Berkey system for a long time, and there are a number of others that are really good.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And, I'm going to be doing some water purification testing with some different systems while I'm out of the country.
Right. And I know you mentioned the Grail system. That's a really good press system that we really like. But there's the K9 Hiker Pros, the MSRs. There's a bunch of different portable water systems that can get you through, a month or so. But if you're going into long term, you need to have something a little more
That's right.
viable.
King Tut 574 says, question, I'm a beginner on a low budget with only a PSA rifle and Magpul iron sights. Should I invest in building up ammo or buy an optic?
I would buy ammo first, for definitely. Learn to shoot with your iron sights. But an optic is great. An optic gives you a lot of advantages, and the U.S. military has done a lot of studies on that, and it's like a massive advantage over iron sights in a actual battle or a battlefield environment.
But on the flip side, a rifle without ammunition is a club.
Right. And magazines. I would first get my thing was first I'd get ammunition. Because you have a magazine with it, but then get at least 6 mags, period. No less than 6 mags, and get a sling. A good sling is vital for your setup. If you've carried a rifle, I went to an event one time, forgot my stupid sling, and I was carrying that dumb rifle with me in my hand the whole time. It was a pain in the butt. So make sure you do get a sling. Plus, you can keep retention on it, and that's another thing. So it can't be taken away from you. Optic is great, and I highly recommend optics, but that would not be my first priority.
No,
ammunition,
I agree. It would be way down on my list as far as the priority.
Sling is number 3, but it is number 3. And then get yourself a nice optic, and then deck it out with Magpul furniture. I think it's already that way. But let me just say this: with the rifle, that's great, and that's a great starting point for SHTF. But please get yourself situated with your food, your water, and those things that aren't so sexy. A good knife, but as you can, pick up what you can as you can. And what I would do is get the ammunition, the magazines, the sling, and then I would get some food items. And canned food will last pretty much indefinitely. I mean, where it says Best Buy, that is just Best Buy, but that doesn't mean the food is not still edible and good. And buy some canned food, dried beans and rice. Get yourself a water filtration system. Get yourself in that shape, because this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to have a firearm, and then when things go south, you're a taker. And that's one thing that we are definitely very cognizant about, and we definitely feel like that you should take responsibility. I'm not saying that you're not. So, but I'm just saying that should be a definite priority with your prepping, even on a low budget.
Jay Henry says, question, I live in Key West, Florida. When SHTFs, I plan to bug in initially. After that, where should I go?
Well, the thing is, in Key West, that's a beautiful place to be. Where you want to be is somewhere where you have a group of people. If you have family, if you have a neighborhood that's very solid, you don't necessarily like everybody, but you have some really good friends that you can count on and depend on. That's very important. I had a friend of mine that go down to Jamaica, and while they were down there, a hurricane hit, and they were trapped in their resort, and they actually had to guard the gates with machetes. And one of the guys that was there is a good friend of mine, and he's the strength coach at Clemson University. He's like a freaking mountain, and he was standing there with a machete, because you never know. But the thing is having good people to have your back, and you need to have a bug out location like that.
You do, yes. And one of the things to consider is, especially in the Keys, is being able to find potable water that you can drink. You're surrounded by ocean. But in the Keys, a lot of the islands they don't have fresh water, and fresh water has to be pumped into those islands. In a grid down situation, water is going to be one of the first things that's gone, that you're not going to be able to access. So if you don't have a natural water resource on the Keys where you live, you're going to have to find at least an island to be able to get to that has water resources.
And another option is to harvest rainwater.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to do that, put up, for the gutter system, it's really easy. In fact, I did a video on it. It's simple. It doesn't take long to actually do. And get yourself a 55-gallon drum that's this water potable. You can store potable water in it. And I put a faucet at the bottom, and then ran it out. I can harvest that water, and it's good fresh water, and then I can take it and maybe purify it.
James W. Robinson says, question, how do you bake bread without gas or electricity?
There are some oven stoves that people have done some experimenting in baking bread, but my wife bakes bread, but I don't. So do you have some ideas, Mr. Chef, Robbie?
Well, yes, I do. As a matter of fact.
I thought you might.
In a lot of other parts of the world where they don't have power like we do in the United States, they don't have the ovens and everything to be able to bake in. They bake what's called naan bread, which is it's non-rising bread. It's a flat bread. You can bake that directly on a stone. You can bake it directly over heat, but it's very easy to be able to bake the naan bread because it doesn't rise, and it doesn't have to have that steady oven temperature that you have to maintain for like 30 minutes to an hour. So in a lot of your instances, non-rising bread is really the way to go versus trying to bake rising bread.
With yeast and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to come back to some questions, but we're going to go ahead and go through the list. Now we're getting into 3 months. We skipped from 1 month to 3 months. Because if you're for a month and you don't go any farther than that, that's fine. But if you're going, 3 months is kind of a sweet spot. It's a place that you can really kind of make some new decisions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about 3 months is typically after that period of time, there'll be a new normal. There'll be some things that'll start to happen, hopefully. So once that 3 months, you've bought some time is what you've done, and you've given yourself a cushion to be able to make wise decisions, to be able to survive through that 3 month period. Typically, it's going to be different. I mean, life will be different after that 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
On a lesser effect was COVID. When COVID hit, and we had the lockdowns and we had all that kind of stuff. And that's another thing, the lockdowns, having that food set aside. When my wife and I, when it first happened, we went, okay, we're good. We're good. But we still needed some things, but overall we could have lived without any trouble. But it does give you peace of mind. And one of the things about this, guys, each of these categories, it's going to give you a level of peace of mind. It's going to take away a little bit of the fear. If something happens, you're not going to say, oh, crap, I don't have anything. Here you've got, okay, you know what? Let's think. Even if it's 72 hours, that gives me 72 hours to think things through, to plan, and to get through the panic that you're going to get at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
3 months is going to give you a nice base to be able to springboard off of. So 3 months to me is a minimum for somebody that's really thinking about prepping, but it gets you in good shape.
And another thing about being prepped for 3 months is in a complete grid down situation where fuel is not being transported, food is not being transported, there's going to be a lot of people that die that first 3 months from either lack of water or starvation, or just disease from not being clean. You're
right.
You're not taking care of your personal hygiene. You get a small cut, it gets infected. It turns into, gangrene or staph because you're not cleaning it and treating that wound properly. So you're going to end up with a lot of people that die in that first 3 months. And if you're set to be able to survive and thrive during that 3-month window, it's going to put you just miles and miles ahead of the average person that doesn't prepare for that 3-month window.
That's right. That's right. And it really does. It gives you a lot of advantages. Now, there's some other side issues that can happen, and you can have your stuff taken. There can be some problems like that. You do need to be able to defend what you have. And when people do get desperate in a 3-month situation, people are going to start to get desperate.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen in hurricanes, the looters, those aren't desperate people. Those people are just taking advantage of a situation. When you get into 3 months, you've got desperate people out there. They want food, and they want your supplies. And so, really honing in on the self-defense aspect. But in all of these things, that can be an issue. But now let's talk a little bit about in the 3 months isn't a economic collapse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is a book this is one of my survival Bibles. This is the Surviving the Coming Economic Collapse by Ferfal. And you can put in FER. Well, there's a link now down below in the description. You can click on it. It's an Amazon link, and it is we get about a penny, if you buy it. But I kept talking about it, and I told Sarah Mack, I said, put that link down there so at least people can find it. But great book. This takes actual events that happened in Argentina and how to prepare for it, guys. It is invaluable. And one of the big things, the takeaways from this is you need a group. You need a group of people. And you don't have to form a group necessarily now, which is really advantageous if you do. But people, when desperate times start to happen, people will start to gather together. And so that's what happened in this book. But we may have some kind of conflict. Could be some kind of short-lived conflict, but 3 months is going to give you something to be able to work with. Now, water. That's where you're going to really have to be able to have some source for water. You're going to have to be able to treat water. Even in a month, you're going to probably need that. But when water's out, you're going to need that time, and you're going to need to be able to consider what are your sources. You can store it up, but there's too much to store. You're going to have a warehouse just to keep your water. So, and then space becomes an issue with 3 months. You start to put your supplies together.
That's right.
And your garages get full, and you start looking like the Hoarders Anonymous.
There's only so much stuff you can store and put back, and you have to be able to have resources that you can tap into to be able to continue going. And water is one of the big ones, a big resource that you have to be able to tap into that for your longer term survival.
Well, we had one guy in our prepper group, and he's stored his stuff in the garage, and he had a really good setup, very organized, but he still had a lot of stuff in it. He got rid of a lot of the extra stuff, just the junk. He just got rid of it to make more space and be able to better organize the supplies he had. And then ended up building an outbuilding and, being able to really, kind of up his game. But organization is a very important part of, especially when you're getting into 3 months. You need to think about, again, your calorie intake. Think about the variety of foods that you have, those kind of things. And really, in a 3-month situation, you should be gardening. You should be kind of looking toward that situation. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But even for 3 months, you can supply your enough for 3 months. You can readily, unless you live in a smaller apartment, which is going to be a little bit more difficult.
Yep.
And I would recommend maybe having a storage unit somewhere where you could keep extra supplies there. That is a possibility, if you're limited in space. One thing we do, we have a cache, is what we call it. And we have a off-site storage unit, and me and a buddy of mine, and we keep emergency supplies there. So if for some reason we're heading toward the house and there's no way to get there, we've got a resource. And so it's just something we've done for a number of years. So 3 months, that's getting big. But most preppers, I would say, shoot for one year.
Mm-hmm.
They shoot for 1 year. Can I get a
people that are really
year's worth of
serious
food?
about prepping?
Right.
Yep.
And 1 year of food for one person is a lot. 1 year of water for one person is a lot. You add extra family members, and then it just multiplies. And so that takes a lot of organization. It takes some rotation.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some forethought. here's the thing, guys. If you're just going to the store and you're just buying whatever, corn, beans, rice, whatever, and you're just piling it up, how are you going to, is that nutritionally sound?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, you have rice to eat, but is that how you want to live? And something Robbie said just a second ago, you want to survive and thrive.
Yep.
You want to do the best you can. You want to be at your best in a situation like this. What are some reasons why we may have? These are major disruptions. These are economic meltdown, political meltdown. And, guys, I'm telling you, with our political environment right now, it's a disaster and it's volatile. And, so one of the things about that is, that is a possibility that's going toward a situation to where you really need to be prepped. Lockdowns, again, could be coming again. They're already starting to talk about it and starting to, and so, you can be like me and say, you put my middle finger up toward it. But war, what if we have a war? There are some potentials, and we know the potentials. There are some potential world wars that could possibly happen.
Mm-hmm.
So supplies are going to be limited. Things are going to happen. Cyber attacks, destruction could cripple our infrastructure, and we could really lose power for years. And cell service and all those kind of things. And that's getting into more of the serious prepper. But here's the thing, guys. Again, it's not haphazard just throwing a bunch of supplies together. It's actually methodically.
Well, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, that'll never happen here in the United States. I would venture to guess that the people that live in Ukraine a year and a half ago would have never thought this would have happened again in their country.
Yeah.
So it can happen. It does happen. And we have to be prepared for not just the potential of something that could happen, but the eventuality that something will happen.
Right. And guys, here's the thing, and it's something we talked about. I think we talked about this last week, is right now we're looking at things happening around us and we're going, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's not going to happen. Because it hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
But look back 10 years ago at how things were going and now how things are going now. It is a whole new world, and things are progressing in certain levels. So again, having your preparations, not just for one scenario.
Yep.
It's just your scenario is to survive. Is what your scenario is.
Well, realistically, look back even 5 years ago. Look at where our country was. Look at where you were as an individual financially 5 years ago. Your socioeconomic level, where you were 5 years ago. The vast majority of us can say that I was in a much better place 5 years ago than where I am today. And, that could be a whole trickle down effect in our economy, with things going from being really good to really not so good to maybe really horrible. And, they're all just signs of things that could potentially happen or that are happening right now and could get much worse.
Well, it's a lot of the stuff that's going on right now with the powers that be is do away with fossil fuels. We need to get rid of meat is a problem for, the climate, and maybe we need to look at other options. And some of these big, very wealthy people are buying huge tracts of farmland.
Yeah.
Bill Gates has bought tons of farmland, and the problem with that is his philosophy and what he believes. And so don't think that he's going to buy that farmland and continue doing the things that he's against. So, there are some potentials there. There's a lot of things. And I don't want to get into a big political thing. I want you just to mainly think about your survival.
That's right.
Think about martial law. Martial law can be a short, small thing. And like I talked about this a few months ago, is martial law can be a good thing. And sometimes there were some times last year and the year before that we needed some martial law in some of these cities because they needed to restore order. But martial law can be used as a political tool. And so you need to be cognizant and think about your preps. Also, then it gets into, how do I secure my preps? How do I hide my preps? How do I keep myself from being a target of whatever? And so those are some things that get into 1 year that, and then with the economy, who knows what can happen there. During the Great Depression, that was a long time before we were restored. And what restored us was a war. So, that's, and a lot of times big economic downturns are only fixed by war. So, do we want to go into that? All right. So let's, we're going to go to number 6. And this one is because, guys, once you hit a year, then it's time to go, okay, let's think about how to make ourselves self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do to be more self-sufficient? Obviously, it's according to where you live. You live in an urban environment. A lot of times there are group gardens or gardens that people come together and they garden together. And thinking about maybe gardening, even in a urban situation or a suburban situation, a small plot in your backyard, having vegetables and supplying good fresh vegetables.
Victory gardens like we had during World War II.
Right.
It may not be that you're sustainable 100% off of it, but it is at least supplementing what you're able to purchase.
Right. Well, let's say you have a year's supply of food, and let's say, you know what? Okay, I got a year's supply. I'm gonna have my garden, or chickens, or ducks, or whatever. Rabbits.
Yep.
But let's say that you have a small garden. What that's going to do with that 1 year's supply of food is it's going to stretch it. That garden's not going to take care of all your needs, but with the garden and with your 1 year preps, it's going to put you in a lot better situation, and you're going to have more health. You're going to have more nutrition out of the garden. And so that in itself, plus, let me just say this, guys, having a garden is just healthy. It's just healthy. If you don't treat it with a bunch of pesticides, you take you go the more natural route. It's going to give you good health, and that's a big plus.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side of that is, and Robbie and I both have been victims of this, is deer, rabbits, you name it. They're in there tearing the garden up, and you got to then figure out that. And here's the other side of that.
And insects are a big deal.
Now, insects are the biggest.
You really have to learn what complementary plants to put in the ground around your garden to help with insect control.
Yeah.
And, that's been one of the big things the last couple of years, my wife and I, that we've really focused on are complementary plants to put around the garden that help with insect control.
Well, that we've been making gardens since the beginning, and we didn't have all these different pesticides and everything else. Right. People have used different methods, natural methods.
Yep.
And one thing we've got,
but it's kind of a lost art, because we don't garden anymore. That's not something that is common. So things that our grandparents did, and a lot of things that our grandparents knew and was just common knowledge to them, has been lost in just a couple of generations when it comes to gardening and being self-sufficient.
And it's become too convenient to go and buy these things that'll help boost our garden supply up.
Yeah, when you can just be reliant on a chemical that you can spray on it that will kill whatever gets on it as well as whatever consumes it eventually.
Right.
It really, I think it's taken away a lot of our reasoning to be able to do things naturally.
Right. Well, convenience is killing us in a lot of ways. And so gardens, husbandry, which is chickens and ducks and geese and whatever else, turkeys, cattle, obviously. I mean, you can go up the list. This is one thing I want to tell you too, guys. One thing that we've done as far as, especially in the homesteading side and even just the 1 year, is we've made relationships with different local farmers, with the farmers markets that are local, and we get to know them. We just bought some beef from a local beef processing plant where they do natural beef, and we bought it, and we've been building a great relationship with them, and building those relationships in a grid down situation. You have a step up the ladder. That's right. There's a creamery around here, and that they produce milk, and there's a lot of things like that are good assets, and to be very friendly and get to know them. You're a patron of their business, and they appreciate it, and then you get to know them, and then you have a little system of trust.
That's right.
And so that's a very important element. Okay, so end all is homesteading. And that's the end all. It makes you more self-sufficient. It gives you a lot of advantages. And so prepping, when you go down the list, 72 hours, your 1 week, your 3 months, your 1 year, then you get into how can I be more self-sustaining? Because you cannot, let's say I'm going to live, the number 40 years. How am I going to put together that much food?
Yeah.
So, and again, there will be some new normals. So there will be markets that open up. There'll be more people growing their own food, more people bartering and trading and doing things like that. That will happen because it's happened all over the world since the beginning of time.
And one of the things that I would highly recommend, even if you're looking at the 1 week, the 1 month, the 3 months, any of those, is go ahead and start doing some gardening now. Even if you're in an apartment, have a small plot of land you're having to grow in, raised beds or whatever.
Tomato plants off your deck.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. But go ahead and start doing some type of gardening right now. And that way you can start building that skill. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that you learn through osmosis. You really have to do it and learn what works in your specific area versus other areas. What we grow here, what we're capable of growing here, you may not be able to grow in your area because of a shorter growing season, longer growing season, different weather conditions and stuff. So you really need to go ahead and get started with that now and learn what works in your area and what doesn't.
That's right. Okay, let's go to some questions and we'll wrap it up.
Melissa Smith asks, how long is water good for in those 55-gallon drums before it turns to gray water? Do you clean it out yearly, every 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, that is a factor. One thing about it is that a lot of it will hold, but it loses its oxygen. So one way to do that is to shake the water up, and it replenishes the oxygen. Typically, your biggest problem is algae, things like that. Keeping it out of the sunlight, and definitely, I mean, for me, 6 months, is a good kind of a benchmark to just kind of pour out the water, pull in new water. You don't want it too stagnant again, but a lot of it is water's water. And if nothing else, you can filter that water if you need to. You can boil that water because it's not going to have the sediment and all the other things that are in there. So you're not stuck if you have water that's been sitting around for 10 years, unless it's got algae all in it. But then you can, again, treat it and still have potable water.
Right.
But I think keeping a rotation of water in probably about a 6 month period, maybe dropping a little bit of bleach in there to kind of keep that down, keep the growth down would be a big plus.
Yeah, 100%. A little bit of bleach in there goes a long way at preventing any type of growth with algae and your different
microorganisms, different things like that.
Yep.
Matt P421 says, "Hey guys, longtime subscriber. Thanks. Do you guys get overwhelmed anymore? Because it's really hard to afford the better quality preps with this economy."
Oh yeah, we get overwhelmed. And in fact, you never, and that's one of the reasons why I want to do this video, because sometimes as a prepper, you feel like you never have enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you won't have enough. You'll never have enough. And I think the faster you come to that realization and go, okay, but what I have, let's say you go to the store today and you buy some supplies and you come in and you put them down and you go, you know what? I'm better off today than I was yesterday toward my preps. And look at it that way. It's a slow burn. Yes, something could trigger a problem and we could have a lot of issues. But typically it just kind of winds down, and then you find yourself in a situation to where you could never put together a year's worth of food once a grid down situation actually triggers.
Right.
And this is the one thing about it. We're going along like this. Everybody's kind of asleep. This is when you get your preparations in order, because once it does this, once the public becomes aware that there is a huge problem and it's facing them right then, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's too late. It's never too late before, but don't let it overwhelm you. Just do a little bit.
That's one of the big things, where setting a budget every week with what you're going to spend on your preps and looking at your preps and filling holes with your budget that you have is really going to put you in a lot better place. The budget, you're not stressing about your money and how much you're spending, what you have to spend. And then when you look at your preps and identify areas where you have holes, where you need to spend that money, whether it's saving up for a bigger, large ticket item that you're going to purchase, or picking up several smaller ticket items, just some canned goods and stuff, water purification, some bleach, whatever. But being able to plan and strategize with what money you have and where it needs to go the most.
Well, and you hit on a point. A lot of times people want to go out, they'll see this beautiful knife that costs $300.
Yep.
And I'm guilty of this as well. And then not having areas of holes where your food is, or your medical supplies. And it was one thing that for Fal, it was funny. He had, as a kid, one of those Rambo survival knives with the little things you can put the survival stuff in the bottom,
compass in the back.
And it was cheap. He said it got him through that whole situation. If you're on a budget, don't go out and spend $500 on a backpack. Don't go out and buy the most expensive shoes that you can buy for your preps. Be reasonable. Once you get a certain limit and where you have the food and the water and your necessities taken care of, then go out and buy yourself a nice pair of boots and go, okay, this is what I'm going to have. So just be careful not to see the shiny things and spend your money on that kind of stuff.
Right.
The second part is take a night, don't go out to dinner. Instead of going out to dinner 3 times a week, or however you do it, because that's where we spend most of our money, like we talked about.
That's right.
Is that you balance it and you say, okay, what's more important, that enchilada at my favorite Mexican restaurant, or prepping? And I might go, but prepping is what the priority should be.
Timothy Vanderbeek asked, "What's the best way to store fuel for my vehicle? I'm living in an apartment."
That's tough. That's a tough one. One thing about keeping fuel in cans is it's just dangerous. It's volatile.
And it degrades. That's one of the big things with the ethanol-based fuels that we have now. The fuel is going to degrade over time. So you could store a couple of 100 gallons of fuel in 55-gallon drums, but unless you're getting non-ethanol fuel or you're putting a stabilizer in it, that fuel's going to go bad relatively quickly. Fuel is one of those things, especially automobile fuel, that I really don't worry about it a whole lot unless I see something like some big triggers where we may end up being short on fuel for a while. Like, was it last year before last, we had a cyber attack on our fuel delivery system for the pipeline that pumps gas here to the upstate that's distributed all over the East Coast. There was a cyber attack on that. We saw it 4 or 5 days before it became national media and the John Q. public became aware of it. When we saw that, we were able to stock up on gas a week ahead of everyone else because we were aware of what was going on and paying attention.
Yeah, people are doing this.
Yep.
Fox News said, we're having this problem. I went to the gas station. People are still doing this.
Yep.
And so it allowed me to go up there with a bunch of jerry cans, fill my car up.
That's right.
But this is what I do, or at least I try to do whenever, is to keep my car full. And if you're doing that, even when it's 3/4 of a tank, top it off. That's the best way to store fuel is in your vehicle.
Anytime you stop at a gas station, just top your vehicle off.
Yeah.
And then you've got, on average 300 miles in your vehicle at any one point in time.
Stephen M. says, do you happen to know the shelf life of a Sawyer mini filter if it's kept in a climate-controlled area, such as a home?
I don't know. One of the things about the Berkey filter system is that we had some set back, and because it was, for whatever reason, they degraded. And so some of those filter systems can be very, they can just break. I mean, they can fall apart. They can degrade. I don't know the exact time, but that is something that probably would be a big subject to kind of look into as far as the shelf life. So, a lot of times you feel like, well, it's just a filter, it's a certain material, but I don't know. And I have some Sawyer minis. So
and that would be something to really look into. Can you vacuum seal the filters with a desiccant to be able to keep moisture out of them so they don't degrade and break down? Would that help? There's a lot of questions.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Keep the air, because one of the things, air and sunlight are very tough on anything.
Yep.
And so being able to seal it up could be a thing. So sorry, I can't answer that, but that's something that I need to look into.
Larry Brown asks, is it smart to sell silver and gold I have saved up to buy more preps such as food and firearms as well as ammo?
That's a tough one.
Right.
I think it would really depend on where you are with your preps right now. I mean, if you're hitting that 3-month mark or that 1-year mark with your preps right now, I would probably set on my silver and gold. If you're more in the 72-hour or the 1 week category, then I would probably look at selling some to be able to fill some holes for the 1 month and 3-month mark.
I'm going to tell you, and a lot of people will, it's funny to me, but silver and gold, precious metals have been currency, which is the means of exchange. If I have a chicken and he has a shovel and he wants my chicken, but I've got 6 shovels, he's not going to get my chicken. But he's got to find somebody that wants this for this, and then you're in this mess. Silver and gold are mediums of exchange, and you can trade those, so he can take that and go trade it for something else. And in a grid down situation, and people will argue about this until they're blue in the face, but they're wrong, because gold and silver have been the means of exchange since they were found, since the beginning. Whether it's Greek, Roman, Babylonian, I don't care what it is. From the beginning of time, Peruvians, gold has been precious, and it holds a value to where if I give you something, I've got value, and people see it as value. And so, yes, I have the other precious metals of brass, lead, and copper, and I've got more than most, but I've got a lot of silver and gold, and I have it put back. So my recommendation is, if you really feel like you need to get to a certain level, I agree with Robbie 100%. Maybe use it. If you're in the 3 month to 1 year, I would not. Look at our economy right now. We're having some major issues, and a lot of it's being kind of pushed down. And food prices and everything has gone through the roof. Inflation is huge. And some things could trigger that into a very destructive situation, which that's when silver and gold are going to be big. Because I want to mention this. China right now is buying gold as fast as they can possibly buy it. The central bank is buying gold and silver as fast as they can buy it. They're stocking up on it.
Bricks.
Yeah. That's the reason that you need to hold on to your silver and gold. It protects your wealth, but it's going to give you a means of exchange for those things that you just aren't aware that you're going to need if a grid down situation happens. And if you're planning for a year, I'm telling you, there are going to be things you're going to need, and gold and silver will get you out of it. Just like in Vietnam, when a lot of the people that were trying to flee Vietnam from the communists, most of them got out because they had jewelry and gold and silver, and they were able to bribe their way out of the country. And same thing happened in Central America. In a lot of situations, people were able to get out of situations because they had physical gold. If they had just money, that could be worth nothing. The paper money.
Not the paper it's printed on.
Yeah. Now, paper money is good to have for a little while, but it'll just lose its value. So that's a good point, but I would be careful and do it as little as possible. Okay, we are going overtime, so hopefully we got the list down, and I hope this helps you. Guys, don't let it overwhelm you. Make a plan and execute the plan. It'll give you peace of mind, and just do what you can, because again, what you do today is going to put you in better shape than you were yesterday. And that's the way you got to look at it. And that's the way we look at it. So again, we really appreciate Sarah Mack for going through the questions and keeping up with all that. And also, we really appreciate Robbie Wheaton from Wheaton Arms, also the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel. Go down to the link and you can go straight to his channel. And just great to have Robbie with us today.
It's great to be here today.
And so we're going to sign off. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.